Today, I'll be showing you how to set up synchronization between two AdGuard Home instances. I've done a video like this for dual Pi holes, and I didn't want to forget the AdGuard Home crowd. After all, some of you have been asking for this. Previously, I showed you how to set up AdGuard Home on a Raspberry Pi in under 20 minutes, including loading the operating system. However, if you know anything about me, you would know that I favor redundancy for critical network services. So my recommendation is 2 instances of AdGuard Home. Why? That's a good question. AdGuard Home is a pretty stable piece of software. Unbound is too. And Raspberry Pis are pretty reliable. Stuff still happens though, and in the case of any of those pieces failing, you could be left without the ability to use your internet from your LAN. If you have your wits about you, you can just change your router's DNS setting back to Quad 9 or whatever. In my opinion though, the better solution is to have a setup that doesn't require you to do anything. And if you've ever had something fail on your network when you're away from home, you probably know what I mean. And for that, you just need to have another instance of AdGuard Home. You can have this other instance on a different Raspberry Pi, with you just having to follow the instructions from the AdGuard Home video again. Except you're a pro this time. Alternatively, you can have the other instance on Docker, Proxmox, or even some routers. The only requirements are that both AdGuard Home instances are the same version, and that they both either have or don't have Unbound locally installed. Either is fine, you just can't mix and match. Then you'll modify your router's DHCP settings to include the second AdGuard Home IP's address as the secondary DNS server. Voila! So easy. Wait, if all you had to do was follow the previous AdGuard Home video 2 times, why do we need this video? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because even though you now have redundant AdGuard Home instances guarding against a failure, those instances are independent with separate configurations. You can manage this manually, but it's a pain. In 5 minutes or less, you can set your secondary AdGuard Home to replicate from the primary at regular intervals. Welcome back to Dad Explains Everything. Recently, I explained the levels of DNS filtering, from on-device setups to router-level filtering to network-wide solutions. In that video, I promised a full walkthrough of the self-hosted AdGuard Home option. After that video, people wanted to know how to make it bulletproof and ultra-reliable. So here we are. Today, you're going to load Docker on the primary AdGuard Home instance, configure the adguard-sync YAML file, pull the adguard-sync container, verify that it worked, and then verify that it works with a manual launch. So if you don't have a second AdGuard Home instance, you're going to have to wait until you have one. I mean, you're welcome to watch this video regardless, and I could use the views. I'm going to assume that both instances are on Raspberry Pis. You'll have to make some adjustments if one or both are not on Raspberry Pis. If only one of your instances is on a Raspberry Pi, I think it's a good idea to have that one designated to be your primary. Also, if you have mismatched Raspberry Pis, like a Raspberry Pi 4 and a Raspberry Pi 02W, like I'm using in this video, I would designate the better Raspberry Pi as the primary. And before the train leaves the station, I do want to mention that this tutorial isn't going to be appropriate for anyone that decided to use the DHCP server built into AdGuard Home. It's not that you can't do that, but it definitely makes it more complicated, as you can't have more than one DHCP server at a time on a subnet or VLAN. If you do want to know how to make DHCP servers fail over gracefully, including the DHCP leases and reservations, let me know in the comments. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get started. Per usual, there's a worksheet. Don't worry, it's short, but you'll want to do the usual. Print it and write down the information requested, and then copy and paste the commands and configs as they come up from the worksheet directly. The link is in the description below. There's a section for network information, and you should fill it out before you start the next steps. I've already touched on this, but you'll need to designate which AdGuard Home is primary and which is secondary. Generally, you'll also list the AdGuard Home addresses in your router and network clients in this order too. You'll note the primary and secondary instances with their host names and IP addresses in the worksheet. I will be referring to the primary instance as AdGuard 1 and the secondary instance as AdGuard 2. In my example, AdGuard 1 has an IP of 192.168.0.13, while AdGuard 2 has an IP of 192.168.0.14. The SSH username for AdGuard 1 is netserve, and both of my web UIs are running on port 80. Both of my AdGuard admin usernames are AGH, and both of my admin passwords are syncpass. These values will be different from what you've listed in the reference information section on the worksheet, and you will need to make substitutions as needed. Now, we're ready to get started. The first thing you'll need to do is open a terminal on your PC and connect with SSH to AdGuard 1. If you're a little rusty, there are instructions on starting the terminal session and connecting via SSH on the worksheet. Be sure to replace the SSH username and the primary AdGuard IP address in the command. Then you're going to copy and paste the curl command from the worksheet to install Docker on the Raspberry Pi. Once that's done, you'll copy and paste the usermod command with no changes. You'll exit the SSH session and then reconnect for the usermod changes to take effect. You can then verify Docker is working with the Docker command and the version switch. You'll copy and paste the makedir command with no changes, so there's a place for the configuration file. Then you'll copy and paste the nano command with no changes to create your configuration YAML file. Once nano has loaded, you'll copy and paste the contents of the file, which includes the first 3 dashes. You'll need to update the primary and secondary IP addresses, the usernames, and the passwords. You may need to update the ports in some cases too. To exit nano, you'll press Ctrl X, then Y, then Enter. Next, you're going to pull the Docker image and set the restart policy. Even though this is multiple lines, you're going to copy all of the bolded lines together and execute it together. Once you've done that, you can verify that it ran with the docker ps and docker logs commands from the worksheet. Assuming that it ran without error, you can verify that it actually worked by logging into your secondary AdGuard Home web UI and verify the sync. You can look at the block lists, allow entries, clients, and other settings. It can help you to see if everything worked if you intentionally made the configurations not match prior to the sync. And this will already be the case if you just loaded up a second instance for this video. I've included extra sections on the worksheet to run a manual sync in case you are too impatient to wait for the 15-minute interval. There are also maintenance commands. I recommend keeping the filled-in worksheet even after you're done. Most people don't keep proper documentation on their home lab, and I don't want that to include you. With any luck, you have 2 AdGuard homes now, with the secondary syncing its configuration every 15 minutes. If you ran into an issue, it's likely the IP addresses or the username and or passwords for accessing the AdGuard homes via API. As always, I'm here to help, so let me know if you ran into any issues in the comments. This video isn't very long because this task isn't very hard, and at this point, if you started off a novice, you're getting to the point where your skills are increasing. Today, you added Docker and configured a container after all. Maybe we can take care of a more ambitious project next. Let me know what you think about that and what you want to add to your Raspberry Pis. And with that, congratulations. You now have the type of redundancy that professionals put in place for critical network services. If you found this video interesting or helpful, hit like, subscribe, and share this with anyone else that you think hates ads too, but also loves reliability and uptime. If you want to support my work, please hype the video and consider becoming a member. I'm not a big deal, so it's really cheap. Depending on the tier, we can hang out on Discord, so there's that. And while I hate to ask for money, these videos take a surprising amount of time to make, and the more specific they get, like taking 2 AdGuard Home instances and syncing them, the fewer people that watch them. And speaking of members, I want to thank new members on the screen for their support. Thanks, and have a great and failure-free day.